I work in an assisted living facility for people with dementia. Today I was sitting in a resident's room. She's still early in her dementia, very aware most of the time. She said she wanted to talk, that there were a few things she needed to tell me. So I sat down and she began. She started by saying, "My last husband is dead," then paused. Sort of. I asked what she meant, but she said I'd need to hear the whole story. A very long story. She told me about her past marriages, men who were abusive, unfaithful, and cruel. She went into detail, and to my surprise, a lot of what she said checked out. Photos, timelines, even things I could confirm online. Her story went on for almost 40 minutes before she finally got to her last husband. She said he'd been sick with cancer. That one night, deep in depression, he shot himself in the face, but survived. For months he lived with the damage until eventually it took his life. They buried him, had the funeral, declared him dead, the whole thing. But hours after the funeral, she said she woke to someone knocking on her door. When she opened it, her husband was standing there, covered in dirt. She said she pulled him inside, terrified, but he didn't speak. He just walked straight downstairs, into the basement, the same place he'd shot himself before. She said she tried to tell her family, but no one believed her. So, she said, she started bringing him food and water every day for months, until her daughter finally told her, "That's enough. You're moving into an assisted living facility." The daughter moved into her mother's house, and after a few days, she apparently saw him too. Out of fear, she locked the basement door and told her mom, "You were right. But we're never talking about this again." By the time the resident finished the story, she was crying, saying she thinks he's still down there alone. That thought chilled me to the bone. I tried to ask logical questions. Do you think he's alive? Did anyone else see him? Why didn't you call the police? Wouldn't the cemetery have noticed something? She answered every question calmly. Said he's dead, but that his physical, invisible ghost still lives there. Now, before anyone assumes it's just dementia, she's in the early stages. She's never been known to lie, and I've never seen her confused like this before. She started the story by saying he was kind of dead, then told a 40-minute detailed version with photos, proof, timelines, everything. I have a master's degree in psychology. I've heard hundreds of delusions, but nothing like this. It was too structured, too vivid, too emotional. It didn't feel like mental illness. It felt evil. I'm an atheist, but after that conversation, I felt something in the room, something cold and wrong. I actually said a prayer. That's how real it felt. People might try to explain it away, but I've worked here for 6 years. I've seen and heard it all. I know this woman, and deep down I believe her story was real. My family and I lived in a ranch-style house with a basement from the time I was about 5 until I turned 10. My great-grandfather passed away around then, and we inherited a few of his things, a recliner and this old brass daybed. We put both down in the basement. Every now and then we'd catch a faint whiff of his cologne or cigar smoke. We always brushed it off, figuring the smell lingered from his furniture. But one night something happened that made us think twice. I was about 9. My cousin came over for a sleepover. We'd just showered and were heading down to the basement to raid my sister's closet. As we started down the stairs, we noticed the steps looked wet. That was weird. So we stepped back, looking from a different angle, and that's when we saw them. Wet footprints, clear as day, in the shape of men's dress shoes. They went down the stairs, circled at the bottom, and trailed off into the basement. We froze, then ran to get my dad. I remember standing at the top of the stairs with my cousin, watching as my dad carefully followed the footprints down. They led him straight to the storage room where our water heater was. He opened the door and sure enough, the pipes had burst. The basement was starting to flood. No one in our house ever wore dress shoes. Not in the basement, not anywhere inside. But my great-grandfather? He was always sharply dressed, pressed suits, polished shoes, the whole deal. We all came to the same conclusion without saying it out loud. He'd come back to warn us before the flooding got worse. 15 years later, after we'd moved away, my parents happened to be in the old neighborhood and decided to drive by our old house. The new owners were outside, so they stopped and said hello, told them they used to live there. The new family smiled politely, then mentioned something strange. They said their little daughter kept talking about a man in nice shoes who visited her at night. They'd even called a priest, thinking the house might need a blessing. My parents laughed and told them, "You might want to call a rabbi instead. He was Jewish, and I think he's just watching over the place." I've told this story before, and it's become something of a mystery in my family. It all happened back in the early 80s when I was about 7 or 8. My great-aunt and uncle had just moved into a house on the outskirts of Atlanta. When they first moved in, my great-uncle took a bunch of photos around the house for insurance documentation. Weeks later, when he got the pictures developed, one photo stood out, and it's still talked about to this day. It was a shot of a bathroom door in the basement. The door had one of those long, full-length mirrors on it, pretty common back then. In the photo, you could see my great-uncle's reflection toward the back of the room, but in front of him, standing just behind the mirror, was the faint yet distinct reflection of a woman. She looked as if she were admiring herself in the mirror, and this wasn't one of those blurry, maybe you see it, maybe you don't kinds of photos. It was vivid. You could see her clearly, but she was semi-transparent. You could see my uncle's reflection right through her. She was beautiful, but she looked sad, almost heartbroken. She had long, dark hair, pale skin, and was wearing an old-fashioned white dress. In her hand she held a lit candle, in one of those antique holders with the little loop for your finger, and around her neck a small dark cat seemed to be perched, its tail draped over her shoulder. My great-uncle swore he was alone when he took those photos. He said there was no one else in the house. And yet this woman appeared in one photo, just one. Everyone in the family saw it. We gave her a name, Sally, and from then on, Sally became a part of our family stories. When we'd visit my aunt and uncle, we'd always ask to see the picture, even though they tried to keep it hidden from us kids so we wouldn't be scared. But I saw it. I saw her, and I'll never forget it. Years later, my great-uncle suffered a stroke, and my grandmother moved in to help care for him. She was a tough Southern woman, stoic, practical, not the type to make things up. One day, while doing laundry in that same basement, she said all the hangers on the racks began swinging wildly. Then she felt a freezing wind rush straight through her. She never told us kids back then, but I overheard my mom and aunt whispering about it years later when I was an adult. When I finally asked my grandmother about it, she didn't laugh it off or change the subject. She just looked at me, dead serious, and said, "I'll never forget how cold it was down there that day." Strange things happened often in that basement. Candles would be lit when no one had been down there, or sometimes they'd find them snuffed, out for no reason. That same basement was also the spare bedroom for us kids when we stayed over. I never slept well down there. I always heard noises, soft footsteps, faint whispers, the feeling of being watched. My cousin swore one night he saw Sally's reflection in the mirror, the same one from the photo, and at that exact moment, the candle behind him blew out. I believed him, because once I think I saw her too. I was running down there late at night to use the bathroom. As I looked in the medicine cabinet mirror, I caught something move right behind me. It was fast, shadowy, but it was enough to send me bolting upstairs. Over the years, people moved. People passed away, and that old photo got lost somewhere between families. We're still trying to track it down. It's like our own haunted heirloom now. My cousin remembers his own night there vividly. He tried to stay up all night watching the small TV in the basement, determined to prove he wasn't scared. But around 3 in the morning, the broadcast ended, leaving only static and that eerie white noise. As he pulled the blanket over his head, he felt resistance, like someone was sitting on the end of the bed. He looked down and saw the indentation of weight pressing into the mattress, but no one was there. He panicked, ran into the bathroom and locked the door. And that's when he saw her again, in the mirror. Sally standing just behind him. He wasn't the only one. Even my grandmother felt her presence more than once. She said sometimes when she'd do laundry, she could feel something brush against her legs, like a cat's tail. After all these years, none of us believed Sally meant harm. She never attacked or screamed or tried to scare anyone. It was almost like she just wanted someone to acknowledge she was still there. We're still trying to uncover who she really was, and maybe, one day, find that photograph again. When I was 13, my family moved into a 2-story house just outside Edmonton, Alberta. It wasn't anything fancy, but it sat on a quiet stretch of road surrounded by tall pine trees and open fields. From the first week, I couldn't shake the feeling that something in that house was off. It started small. Lights would flicker even though my dad had just replaced the wiring. Doors we'd closed would be open in the morning, and every now and then we'd hear footsteps upstairs. Heavy, slow steps when no one was up there. At first, my parents blamed it on the house settling. But I knew what I heard. One night, my mom called up the stairs for me to come help her with groceries. I yelled back that I'd be right there, and she swore she saw me standing at the top of the stairs just watching her. The thing is, I wasn't home yet. I came through the front door about 10 minutes later, carrying a bag of chips from the store. My mom froze. She went pale and said, "Where were you?" I told her I'd just gotten back. That's when she told me she'd seen me upstairs. Same clothes, same haircut, same blank expression. We both tried to laugh it off, but after that, the atmosphere in the house changed. It felt heavier, like something was watching every move we made. Then my dad started noticing things too. He'd find muddy footprints leading from the back door into the kitchen, even on dry days. Our dog would bark at empty corners of the room, growling low, hackles raised. The worst moment came one night in late fall. I'd just gone to bed, and my room was dark except for a sliver of moonlight through the curtains. I was drifting off when I heard someone whisper my name. "Eli?" It sounded exactly like my dad's voice. I sat up, thinking maybe he needed help with something. The whisper came again, closer this time. "Eli, come here." The voice was coming from the hallway. I got out of bed, walked to the door, and looked out. That's when I saw him, or what looked like him. My dad, standing halfway down the hall, motionless. The same height, same build, same plaid shirt he'd worn earlier that evening. But his face was wrong. It wasn't angry or sad, just empty, like a mask. Then, without a sound, he turned and walked toward the basement stairs. I followed halfway before stopping. Something deep in my gut screamed at me not to go any farther. I ran to my parents' room, threw open the door, and there was my dad fast asleep in bed. He jumped up when I told him what I saw. He grabbed a flashlight and searched the house from top to bottom. Every door was locked, every window shut tight. After that, we started sleeping with our doors locked. My dad even nailed the basement door closed for a while. But strange things kept happening. My reflection in mirrors seemed a split-second delayed. I'd hear footsteps pacing the hall at night when everyone was asleep. One night my little sister said she woke up to someone sitting on her bed. She thought it was me until she noticed I was sound asleep on the floor beside her. Whoever it was whispered, "You're not supposed to be here." We moved out a few months later. No big drama. No goodbye, just packed our things and left. A few years after that, I found an old article about the property. Turns out a man had built that house in the 1950s, but died under strange circumstances. His wife told police he'd started seeing himself around the house weeks before it happened. Sometimes I still dream about that hallway, about the sound of my name being whispered in my dad's voice. And every time I wake up, I swear I can still hear those slow, heavy footsteps fading away. When I was about 11, my parents bought this old Victorian-style house in upstate New York. It had a big porch, tall windows, and one of those narrow staircases that creaked like it had a heartbeat of its own. My room was upstairs, right next to a small attic door that everyone in the family ignored. At first, the house felt cozy, but after a while, strange things started happening. I'd wake up at night to the sound of tapping, light, rhythmic, like fingernails against wood, coming from inside that attic wall. Sometimes I'd knock back just to see what would happen. And almost every time, something knocked back. My parents thought it was mice. I wanted to believe that too, but mice don't whisper your name in the dark. It started one night when I woke up and heard soft breathing, slow, shallow, coming from behind the wall right next to my bed. I held my breath and listened. The breathing stopped. Then I heard it again, closer this time, like someone pressing their face against the plaster. The next morning I asked my dad if anyone had ever used that attic before. He said probably not. It was too small to even stand in. Just insulation and old pipes. Still, something about that space made my stomach twist every time I looked at the door. A few weeks later, I was homesick from school, lying in bed with the flu. Around mid-afternoon, I heard shuffling from the attic again, slow, dragging steps above my ceiling. I stared at the door, waiting for it to stop. Instead, I watched in disbelief as the knob on that little attic door began to turn. It creaked open about an inch before, stopping. Silence. Then, I heard a low voice whisper, "Come play." I screamed so loud my mom came running. She searched the attic, found nothing but dust and cobwebs. She told me it was just fever dreams, that I was imagining things. But I wasn't. I know what I heard. After that, I couldn't sleep unless the attic light was on. But even that didn't help for long. Some nights I'd wake up and see a faint shadow move across my ceiling, tall, thin and swaying like it didn't belong to any person. Other times, I'd find my bedroom window open when I was sure I'd closed it. One night, I gathered enough courage to press my ear against the wall. Where the sound always came from, I could hear faint scratching, like someone clawing at the inside. Then, out of nowhere, 3 loud knocks, bang, 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 so hard it rattled my nightstand. The next morning, I found tiny cracks in the paint right where I'd heard the noise, like something was trying to push its way through. My dad finally decided to open the attic up for good. He pulled down the old wood panel and crawled inside with a flashlight. What he found still makes my skin crawl. At the far end of the narrow space, hidden behind insulation, was a small section of wall that looked newer than the rest. Fresh plaster, smooth and clean compared to everything else. My dad tapped it, and it echoed hollow. He pried it open with a crowbar, and inside was a small cavity, like a crawl space. And sitting there, covered in dust, was a broken wooden doll. It had black button eyes, tangled hair, and its arms were bent backward like they'd been twisted. There was also something else, a small, child-sized rocking chair, wedged into the corner facing the wall. After that day, my parents sealed the attic completely. They even moved my bed to the other side of the room. The noises stopped for a while, but not for long. A few months later, my little sister started saying she could hear someone singing from inside the walls, a soft, broken lullaby. We moved out soon after. To this day, I still have nightmares about that whisper, the voice that said, "Come play." And when I dream of that house, I always see the same thing, that little door, slowly opening, even though I know we nailed it shut. Back in college, my friends and I rented a small cabin deep in the woods for a weekend getaway. It was supposed to be 3 days of hiking, drinking, and just getting away from the city. The cabin was old, made of dark timber, with creaky floors and dusty windows that looked like they hadn't been cleaned in years. The first night felt normal enough. We built a fire, grilled food, played cards. But the woods around that cabin were silent. Not peaceful silent, unnervingly still. No wind, no crickets, not even the sound of leaves shifting. It was like the forest itself was holding its breath. Around midnight, we decided to go for a short walk down the trail behind the cabin. We brought a flashlight, but the beam barely cut through the fog. After a few minutes, one of my friends, Mark, said he thought he saw someone standing in the trees, a pale figure just beyond the light's edge. We laughed it off, teasing him about ghost stories, but when I turned to look, I saw it too. A shape, human-sized, just standing there between the pines, motionless. When we pointed the flashlight at it, the beam flickered, and in that split second, the figure was gone. We ran back to the cabin, slamming the door behind us. Everyone was shaken, but no one wanted to admit they were scared. We made jokes, poured more drinks, and pretended everything was fine. But deep down, we all felt it, that crawling unease, like something had followed us back. Later that night, I went to wash up in the small bathroom. The mirror was fogged over from the wood stove heat, so I wiped it with my hand. For a second, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, because behind my reflection, standing just over my shoulder, was the faint outline of a woman. She wasn't clear, more like a misty silhouette, but she was there. Long hair, bare feet, her head tilted slightly like she was studying me. I froze, didn't move, didn't breathe. I blinked and she was gone. When I stepped out, I didn't say a word to anyone. I just sat by the fire, staring at the dark window, waiting for morning. The next day, we decided to leave early. Mark said he'd heard something scratching at the cabin door around 3 a.m., like fingernails dragging along the wood. Another friend swore she heard a woman humming outside her window. We packed up fast. None of us said much during the drive back. But here's the part that still chills me. About a week later, one of my friends sent a group text. He'd been developing photos from that trip. Just normal shots of the woods, the fire, all of us hanging out. In one of the photos taken near the tree line behind the cabin, there was a shape. A woman, barefoot, standing between the trees, looking directly at the camera. We compared it to all the other photos. She wasn't in any of them, just that one. And here's what's even worse. When we zoomed in, her face looked blurry, but familiar. Like it was one of us. We never went back to that cabin. None of us even wanted to talk about it again. But sometimes when I look at photos of that trip, I still check the background, just to make sure she isn't there again, watching.